We'll Never Forget You, RobertoClemente. By Trudy Engel. RobertoClemente loved baseball. When his parents couldn't afford to buy him a ball and a bat, Roberto used a skinny broomstick to hit empty tomato cans. He could not be struck out. Roberto was born in 1934 on the tropical island of Puerto Rico. He first played for a youth league team. Then he moved up to the Puerto Rican Winter League. Because of his exceptional talent, Roberto was chosen to play for a minor league team in Montreal, Canada. He was soon recruited by a major league team, the Pittsburgh Pirates. Roberto was a spectacular success. He shared that success with his family, friends, and the community. His generosity became as well known as his sports ability. By 1972, only 10 players in the history of baseball had gotten 3,000 hits. Roberto badly wanted to be number 11. When the season began, he needed only 118 hits to reach the magic number. Roberto had gotten more than 118 hits every year he had played in the major leagues. "He won't have any trouble," said his family and friends. "He'll make it." With 3,000 hits, Roberto was sure to be the first Latin American ballplayer to be voted into baseball's Hall of Fame. But during much of the season, Roberto was either hurt or sick. He had the flu, a stomach virus, trouble with his heels. He lost 10 pounds and had to wear a uniform that belonged to a thinner teammate. By the middle of August, Roberto had missed almost half of the Pirates' games. People stopped talking about 3,000 hits. There just weren't enough games left in the season, they thought. And nobody knew if he would be well enough to play again the next year. With only 26 games left, Roberto still needed 25 hits to get to 3,000. And then in September, he started to hit. Was there a chance he might get his 3,000th hit after all? On September 28 in Philadelphia, Roberto faced Steve Carlton, the great Phillies pitcher. He hit a single to right field. It was hit number 2,999. Right away, Roberto was taken out of the lineup. Everyone wanted him to get the 3,000th hit in Pittsburgh in front of the hometown fans. The next night in Pittsburgh, it was cold and rainy. Even so, 24,000 fans turned out to cheer Roberto on. The Pirates were playing the New York Mets. Tom Seaver was pitching. If Seaver could win this game, it would be another 20-game season for the Mets' ace pitcher. The crowd cheered loudly as Roberto walked up to the plate in the first inning. One of Seaver's fastballs whizzed over the plate. Roberto swung hard but did not get much wood on the ball. It bounced over Seaver's glove. The second baseman ran in to grab it. The ball bounced off his glove. Roberto pulled up at first base. Was the play a hit or an error? If the scorekeeper said it was an error, Roberto would not get his 3,000th hit. It was so noisy in the stadium that only a few people heard the words, "Error, second baseman," over the loudspeaker. All eyes turned toward the scoreboard. For what seemed like a long time, there was nothing. Then the big H for hit went up. The crowd cheered and clapped. The people were sure that Roberto had gotten hit number 3,000. Suddenly, everyone became quiet. The H disappeared. An E for error went up on the scoreboard. The scoreboard crew had not heard the call. They made a big mistake when they put up the H. Boos sounded in the stadium. The Pirate fans felt cheated. So did Roberto. He was up 3 more times that night but could not get another hit. "I'll be out there swinging again tomorrow," Roberto said after the game. The next day, John Matlock pitched for the Mets. That was bad news for Roberto. He had not hit one of Matlock's pitches all season. In the first inning, Roberto struck out. He came up to bat again in the 4th inning. All-star first baseman Willie Stargell was Roberto's best friend on the team. He handed Roberto a bat. "Go get it," Stargell said. And Roberto did. He sent a hard-line drive bouncing off the left field wall for a double. The cheering that filled the stadium lasted for a full minute. On second base, Roberto tipped his helmet to the fans. Willie Mays left the Mets dugout and came over to shake Roberto's hand. On that day, September 30, 1972, there were just 3 men playing baseball who had 3,000 hits. They were Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, and now RobertoClemente. On December 23, 1972, the earth shook in Nicaragua. Nicaragua is a small, poor country in Central America, not far from the island of Puerto Rico. 2 days before Christmas in 1972, a terrible thing happened there. A giant earthquake hit the biggest city in Nicaragua. Over 6,000 people were killed. Another 20,000 were hurt. Thousands more were left homeless. People needed food, water, and medicines. Roberto had been in Nicaragua a month before the earthquake. While he was there, Roberto heard about a 14-year-old boy who had a terrible thing happen to him. He had lost both his legs in an accident. The boy's parents had died. He needed artificial legs but had no money to pay for them. A team in the Puerto Rican Winter League had raised part of the money the boy needed. Roberto himself gave the rest. He went to see the boy and told him he would be able to walk again. Roberto then returned to Pittsburgh. When the earthquake hit Nicaragua, Roberto thought of his young friend. Had he lived through it? Was he all right? He had to find out. Roberto also thought about the thousands of other people who had lost their homes and everything in them. Caring about others who had less than he did was nothing new for Roberto. He had followed his father's teachings. He helped out other members of his family when they were in need. After his brother had died, he supported his nieces and nephews. Roberto was kind to many people. One day, during a game, the Pirates announcer brought a deaf boy to meet Roberto. Roberto talked to the boy, using his hands and smiling. Later, Roberto took one of his bats into the stands where the deaf boy was sitting. He gave him the bat. On the side of the bat he wrote, "You don't have to be able to hear to play baseball and enjoy the game. Best wishes, RobertoClemente." So no one was surprised when Roberto started helping people in Nicaragua after the earthquake. He went from door to door in his neighborhood in San Juan asking for money. He spoke on radio and television asking the people of Puerto Rico to give money, food, clothes, and medicines. He helped collect the supplies that came in. And he found ships and a plane to take the food and clothing to Nicaragua. All during the Christmas holidays in 1972, Roberto helped pack the supplies into boxes. 2 plane loads of goods had already been flown to Nicaragua. Another would go on New Year's Eve, the last day of the year 1972. New Year's Eve is an important holiday in Puerto Rico. People come together from all over the island for family celebrations. But Roberto decided to leave his family and fly to Nicaragua. I must see that the people who need the supplies really get them, he said. And what had happened to his young friend who had lost his legs? This was his chance to find out. The plane going to Nicaragua was a 20-year-old propeller plane. 3 weeks before, it had been in an accident. The brakes had not worked and the plane crashed into a wall. The propeller tips were badly bent. Now, the brakes were fixed and the plane had new propellers. The plane was set to be ready to fly again. It was supposed to take off at 4 p.m. in the afternoon. But at 9 a.m. in the morning, the owner of the plane was still trying to find a crew to fly it to Nicaragua. At last, a pilot was found. There was a flight engineer, but he did not know much about that kind of plane. They could not get a co-pilot. The owner of the plane no longer had a license to fly, but he decided to be the co-pilot anyway. At 3:30, Vera took Roberto to the airport. The plane was not ready. Teenage helpers were loading the plane. It was already full, but they kept putting more and more boxes in. Everyone wanted to get the last of the supplies to Nicaragua. "Is it safe?" Vera asked. "Look, the plane is fine," the owner said. "It will be ready soon. If it were in bad shape, I wouldn't go myself." And he climbed into the cockpit. At 5 p.m., Roberto got on board. Vera waved goodbye. It wasn't until after 9 p.m. that the plane rolled down the runway toward the ocean for takeoff. The San Juan airport is just a mile from the beach. The plane was only in the air for a few seconds before there was a loud bang. Flames shot out from one of the engines. The people in the control tower heard the pilot say, "I'm coming back around." Then there were 2 more explosions. The plane went off the radar screen in the control tower. A man who lived in a house near the ocean heard a plane roaring overhead. He looked out the window and saw it flying so low it almost hit the palm trees by the shore. Then he saw the plane fall into the ocean. The man left the window to tell his son to call the police. When he came back, the plane had completely disappeared, sinking into the ocean. It was after midnight when the phone rang at the Clementes with the news about the plane crash. Vera rushed to the beach. Bright orange flares lit up the night sky. Police cars parked on the beach and shone their headlights into the ocean. Coast Guard ships were in the water. Search crews looked for bodies and parts of the plane. Nothing was found. The next day, the search went on. In the morning, the beach was full of people. Some were standing in the water. Some were holding small radios to their ears. The search went on for weeks. Crowds were there every day. Every afternoon, Vera Clemente came and stood in the sand and watched. Then one day she stopped coming. The Coast Guard picked up parts of the plane. Later, Roberto's briefcase washed up on shore. But Roberto's body was never found. It was hard to believe Roberto was gone. "I expected him to swim to shore someplace," one of his pirate teammates said. High on the hills in Pittsburgh, there is a billboard that everyone can see from the Pirate Stadium. It is lit up brightly at night. After the plane crash, the sign said, "Adiós, amigo." Goodbye, friend. Many wonderful things were said about Roberto. That he was the best ball player of his time. That he was the biggest hero Puerto Rico ever had. Roberto became the first Latin American ball player voted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. But there was something else about Roberto that was even more important. "He was a good man," said Willie Stargell. On opening day of 1973, the Pirates scoreboard read, "Thank you, Roberto. We will never forget the Great One." The city of Pittsburgh and the Pittsburgh Pirates kept their promise. They did not forget Roberto. In July 1994, more than 20 years after the plane crash in which he lost his life, a statue of RobertoClemente was dedicated at the Pirate Stadium in Pittsburgh. The statue was paid for by the people of Pittsburgh and shows Roberto dropping his bat after hitting the ball. It must have been a good hit. He is just starting to run, as his eyes are fixed on the ball far in the distance. The statue tells us that Roberto lives on in our hearts and minds. But he lives on in more than our memories. Roberto lives, too, in all the children that he helped. Before he died, Roberto had plans to build a sports city in Puerto Rico where the poor children of the island would have a chance to learn to play different kinds of sports. After Roberto died, Sports City was built by his family. Over the years, thousands of children have gone there. One baseball player who got his start at Sports City is Ruben Sierra, an outfielder for the Oakland Athletics. Sierra not only made it to the major leagues, but he also played in the 1994 All-Star Game. Sierra was a poor boy from a poor village in Puerto Rico. He says he would still be there today if it hadn't been for Roberto's Sports City. When Sierra came up to bat during the All-Star Game, millions of people were watching. They saw that he wore the number 21 on his uniform. That was Roberto's number. Sierra says, "He was the greatest. That's why I wear his number, in honor of him."
Everybody's set and they want Bobby to get that big number 3,000. Menwek on the 0-1. Bobby hits a dive into the gap in left center field. There she is.